So a round of applause for Irene and Jennison. All right, Irene, over to you.
Thanks everyone for your time. I know everyone is hungry. We are almost there. So first, my name is Irene Mbari-Kirika, and I want to give a chance to my dear friend Jennison to introduce himself before we proceed. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennison Asuncion, pronouns he, him. I'm a Filipino male. I've got black hair. I'm wearing a white shirt with checkers on them and a black jacket, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Jennison. And I think that's something we forgot. When you're speaking, it's important to describe yourself. So thanks, Jennison, for reminding us so that people who are blind can understand at least who's in the room and what are you wearing, what do you look like. So I'll do a simple description. My name is Irene. I have some blonde long extensions, and I'm brown in color. My daughter says I'm brown, she's chocolate. And I'm wearing a royal blue dress. And I'm happy to be here with Jennison to talk about accessibility.
I should just add, for folks who are blind in the audience, I'm also completely blind and I have a white cane.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, fantastic. So I'm really excited to be sitting with Jennison here. Jennison is the co-founder of the Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I'm sure he'll be telling us more about it. But also, I wanted us to discuss what does digital accessibility really mean to you, Jennison? And the reason I say that is that digital accessibility is a very new topic across the continent here in Africa. And sometimes it will be difficult to understand. Tech is complex, but it's not only complex here. Even in the West, people are still trying to figure out digital accessibility. So maybe you can start by telling us a bit about GAD, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and then what does digital accessibility mean to you and why is it important?
Okay, are you cool if I swap them around? All right, let's do this. So for me, it's personal digital accessibility because I am a benefactor of when things are accessible. So to me, it's my ability as someone who is completely blind to interact with, to consume, and to create all manner of digital content. So whether that's a website, whether that's a mobile application, or whatever else that's planned that someone in some garage somewhere is thinking up next. I know that the big area right now is XR access, access to XR, which is virtual reality, augmented reality, all of that stuff. So to me, it's about being able to do all of those things independently. So I don't have to ask Irene, can you tell me what message is on the screen? Or Irene, can you enter my password for me? That would get rid of my privacy. Now, in terms of Global Accessibility Awareness Day, back in 2011, I was living in Toronto, Canada, and it was a perfect November day, which was cold. And I happened to be just on Twitter, and I came upon a tweet from someone I did not know at the time named Joe Devon. And he said, it was an automatic tweet, and it basically said, Joe Devon has just published this blog post that says accessibility needs to go mainstream now. Now, just to back up for a minute, before that moment, I had already been trying to think of inventive and creative ways to make accessibility something that was digestible to your everyday tech professional, your designer, your engineer. Because I knew inherently that the majority of tech professionals have no sense of what people with disabilities experience with digital, how they experience it, et cetera, et cetera. So I learned about things like accessibility camps where you get people together in a room, you promise them free food, and you talk about accessibility. And so I had started an accessibility camp in Toronto and helped set up one in Boston and such. But so that had happened, and then here I see this tweet, and I'm like, this is interesting. And so I activated the link and I read the blog post, and Joe Devon was at the time a back-end developer, and he was basically talking about his father's experience trying to interact with his bank's website. And his dad was getting older, and like all of us who are getting older, your hearing and your vision starts to get impacted. And Joe Devon was just upset that his dad could not interact with the bank's website. And then he basically said, developers need to know something about accessibility. They need to know what a screen reader is. And we need to have a day, a global day, where developers can contribute back and learn about accessibility. So I was like, this is really interesting and this is perfect. So I just messaged him back on his blog, hey, you know, I'm really interested in doing this. If you are too, let's do it. And so as two overly committed people were, it took us a couple of weeks to get into each other's schedule, but we got on the phone. We first learned we were both Canadian, so that was interesting and cool. He was living in Los Angeles, I was again in Toronto, and we said, okay, let's just choose a date. And the first date we came upon was May 9th, and we said, okay, let's do this. So in 2012, May 9th of 2012, Joe on his end, he called all of his folks and emailed all of his folks. I also emailed friends of mine in the accessibility community and said, hey, on this day, May 9th, can you just run something? Whether it's a conference or whatever, just do something that will expose your everyday tech professional to accessibility. And we didn't have any idea what was going to happen. So there was this day, May 9th, and we were shocked. People, Shilpi Kapoor in India held this government conference. Who was going to think that someone was going to run this government conference on accessibility? And people in other places were running meetups and all kinds of different things that we'd learn about later. And fast forward, last year, we celebrated our 10th anniversary. So we couldn't imagine that Global Accessibility Awareness Day would have happened. And I'm so happy to be here to extend Global Accessibility Awareness Day, even though now it's on the third Thursday of May. Being one of the co-founders, I can kind of extend the party a little bit. And we're all here to celebrate this ICT accessibility standard here in Kenya. So happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day to everyone here. Did that answer your question?
No, that's good. So yes, this is definitely an extension of Global Accessibility Awareness Day because it was actually last week, and it's a global phenomena. And what's critical that you talked about is the importance of mainstream designers and developers to be involved in this discussion. Why? Because they're developing products and services on a daily basis, and those products are not inclusive. So if Africa is going to leapfrog and make a difference, we really need to focus on that group so that we make sure that they understand the importance of inclusive design, and we make sure that their products are accessible. I'm sure some of you, especially if you're blind or you have any other disabilities, you've struggled to use mobile money applications, you've struggled to use insurance products. I know people who are blind who've said to me sometimes they have to get a friend to transact for them. And the problem is they lose a lot of money because they're sharing their private bank account information with someone. That can be resolved. We've launched the standard, we have the requirements, so it's very easy to focus on inclusive design.
Can I just say, Irene, real quick, to your point, I've been working in the digital accessibility space since 2006. And the one thing I can guarantee you is that when you get an engineer or a designer into a room with someone with a disability or impairment, and they watch us using their technology either unsuccessfully or successfully, that's the lights on moment. That's the moment when, you know, they have this moment of, oh my goodness, like, ugh. But then they get it. Because, you know, standards, you know, we all love the standards, but let's face it, some of them, including the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, are lots to read. But when you actually see someone and talk to them, what are you doing? What is that? And oh, you're not able, what did that say? Or you can't hear the audio on the video because you're deaf. Like, all of those things, it comes to life. And so that's so important to have those conversations between engineers, designers, the funders, and actual end users with disabilities or impairments. That's where the things hit the road.
Yeah. Thank you. And another really important group of people is content creators.
Yes, yes.
All these people who are creating content, posting it on social media. We are leaving out 15% of people who can actually enjoy that content. So there's a way you can make your online digital content accessible. And why I point out social media is because today it's like the primary mode of communication to the world. So let's be inclusive as much as we can. So my next question, what are you most proud of in terms of what Global Accessibility Awareness Day has achieved to date?
Sure. For me, I think the biggest achievement is that the conversations with Global Accessibility Awareness Day have extended beyond English. The capital G in global means that we need to have these conversations in all different languages. And so, particularly with our 10th anniversary last year, we made a big effort to translate a lot of our materials into other languages, including Swahili. I'm 99% sure. But yeah, and so having those conversations in languages that engineers and designers and people with disabilities speak, because it's not just English, that is so critical. It was so thrilling that last year Joe Devon and I had an interview that was translated into Chinese, into Mandarin. And again, because we understand that those people who are creating content or creating the technology are not only doing this in the English language. So I think that is going to be the big push in the years to come, whether it's through Global Accessibility Awareness Day or through the foundation that we launched last year, is to really double down on meeting everyday tech professionals in the languages that they speak in.
Great, thank you. I think for a very long time, and I stand to be corrected, there's been a huge push to be inclusive, but inclusion has always focused on gender, on race, and many other subjects, but rarely on disability. And now we are adding another part to this, where we are saying now we need digital inclusion. So I know it gets more complicated, but we start from somewhere and we keep going and we celebrate every little milestones that we can make along the way. So another question for you is, what are the challenges or barriers to digital accessibility, and how do we respond to this?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge still today, after everything, after the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines have been around for over 20 years and all of that, I think it's still basic education and awareness. All of us in this room, we all know this. But that's the biggest thing. We need colleges to be teaching just basic concepts of accessibility to computer science, engineering, and design students. There's an organization in America called Teach Access, and they have a mission by 2030 to have 1 million college students learn fundamentals of accessibility. That's a lot of students, but that's so important. So education is critical. And then the other thing is just understanding the speed at which we are moving. So I live in Silicon Valley, and we are turning out code so often, and new technology is coming around so often, that we need, in the accessibility space, we need to come up with ways to be more nimble and to be able to have tools that will make it easier for the everyday person to know, is this widget, is this page, is this app accessible, without knowing everything about accessibility, but just to have that tooling in place. So there's bits of it that's a technology solutions that we need, and the other is just basic awareness. And that's something with the Global Accessibility Awareness Day Foundation. We are committed to disrupting the culture of technology and digital product development so that accessibility is a core requirement. And part of the way we're going to do that is we want to make sure people understand that if you're going to make something accessible, you need to be intentional about it. You know, many of us hear phrases like, oh yeah, we're considering accessibility, or yeah, we're going to think about it in development. But it takes more than just thoughts and considerations. People need to be intentional about what they're doing for accessibility, and people need to be held accountable for doing that. It can't all just be hanging on one person to go into a project and make everything accessible. Everyone has a role, whether you're a project manager, a product manager, a designer, an engineer. You also need to include people with disabilities. We heard this earlier on already. Inclusive design, inclusive engineering means including people with disabilities in that mix, in all of those processes.
Thank you so much. I think I have one final question for you. How do we go about building accessibility into every technology project?
So I'll reiterate what I said before. The idea is being intentional and building accessibility in from the very beginning. So having it as a user requirement, as a core user requirement, having it embedded as part of, if you're an Agile, having it part of your definition of done. And either way, tracking accessibility, making it part of the standing agenda for all of your updates, and making sure different people are accountable, someone in design, someone in project management, someone in engineering, but then making sure everyone understands that they have a role to play. I think that's the only way to do it. And again, of course, you know, I'll keep beating the same drum to say we need to include people with disabilities. And I'm not just saying people with disabilities as testers. We need to be hiring people with disabilities as engineers and as designers and as product managers and project managers, so that our voices are actually in the rooms where all of these new things are being discussed at the early stage, and where we can actually be saying, so what about accessibility? And really understand what that means and to drive that home. So again, it's intentionality, it's accountability, and it's about inclusion of people with disabilities throughout every aspect.
Excellent, thank you. So I think the takeaway from this is accessibility is a process. It's not a one-time step.
Absolutely not.
You don't do it once and forget. It's part of the process of the when you're developing a product, the product life cycle, accessibility from the beginning till the end. When you're gathering your requirements, who are going to be your users, let's make sure users with disabilities are part of that process. And again, when you make any changes to your products as well, make sure people with disabilities are part of that process, because sometimes what happens is when you're developing a product, you make it fully accessible. Then you come back later to start putting add-ons and all these fixes, and then you forget people with disabilities. Then you're back to square one. So let's make sure we remember that accessibility is a process.
And just real quick, Irene, because the question always comes up, you know, oh, we don't know anyone with a disability or an impairment. Like, where are we going to find people? So a couple really quick, contact your NGOs in your country of people with different disabilities or impairments. Don't just contact the NGOs of people who are blind, but all different disabilities or impairments. And trust me, you will have people who are willing to act as subject matter experts and testers. Now, also treat them like you would treat anyone else, which means they don't do this for free. Yeah. But I think it's so important, because that's always the question or the excuse that's made is, what do we do? Like, we don't know anyone with a disability. Every country has NGOs with people representing people with different disabilities or impairments, and I can guarantee you that those NGOs will be more than happy to partner to make the world much more digitally accessible.
So actually, that's interesting. You raised the issue of when you have people with disabilities testing your products for you, we need to make sure we pay them. So accessibility is actually creating employment for people with disabilities. So Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you see Jennison outside, please talk to him, ask him questions. And I also want to acknowledge, I think we have maybe people from almost 30 countries in this room. Please make a point of talking to Jennison or anybody else. We have a lot of accessibility, people with accessibility experience. Feel free to stop, chat with them, and ask any questions that you may have. So, Jennison, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. And if for more information about Global Accessibility Awareness Day, you can go to accessibility.day. And the foundation, you can go to GAD, G-A-A-D, .foundation. And it's such an honor to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. One last thing I wanted to mention. There's normally a misconception that accessibility is about people who are blind. The answer is no. Accessibility covers all disabilities. The standard we launched covers all disabilities. So when you make your product accessible, you're covering all people with disabilities. You're also going to benefit from people, the elderly are going to benefit from your product. People in low bandwidth areas will benefit from your product. Even people with low literacy levels. And I think in Africa, we tick the boxes in all those areas. So as we develop our products, let's think about accessibility first. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
All right.
Over to you.
Let's clap for them.